think most people are here now, so I'd like to welcome you all to the Communicating the CAT4 Report to Parents session. Welcome back if you attended the first session on Understanding CAT4. Obviously this evening you have myself, Miss Hamer, I'm the Deputy Head in Secondary, and Mr. Budd, who is the Deputy Head in Primary. And if you flick to the next slide, Mr. Budd, I think we've got some delightful photos of us, just in case anyone hasn't met us yet. So yeah, within our respective schools, we're both responsible for the CAT tests and the CAT data that your child has just sat and just experienced. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a much wider understanding of what the report actually says, and also how it can help your child and how you can work with them to really work in their favour and the way that they prefer. Now, for those of you that weren't here last time, we'll just do a quick recap. The CAT4 test is the Cognitive Abilities Test. So it basically measures a student's ability across 4 different reasoning batteries. Now, it's really important to stress that this is not an attainment test. We're not testing what they know. It's not a test that they can revise for. It's very much a test of how they think with numbers, how they think with words, how they think with shapes. So last time we gave some examples of the questions, and some of them, for example, are you fill in the sequence of numbers. So it might say 2, 5, 7, 12, and you'd have to find the next number. It's probably not the best example, but it's not something that they can really practice or prepare in advance. And again, the shape is very much about being given a shape, and the students have to rotate it in their mind and transpose it and see how it comes out. So again, very much a test of how they think and how their brains work best. So hopefully on the 23rd, which was last Thursday, you all received your CAT4 individual report for parents. Now, for some of you, I know that we had a few issues with sending them across, and hopefully you've been in touch with our ISAMS manager, Mr. Simon Foster. I know he's received quite a lot of emails. And if you still haven't received the report, you're more than welcome to contact your child's form tutor or Mr. Foster as well, and we'll make sure we get it across to you as soon as possible. This year, students in Year 4, Year 6, Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, Year 10 and Year 12 were tested. And the reason that we didn't do Years 11 and 13 is that because the validity of the report is about 2 years. We had a lot of new students coming into the secondary school, which is why we've tested so many. But if your child's in Year 11 or Year 13, or indeed Year 5, Mr. Budd, we'll be able to access your previous report if you don't have it. And we can again get that to you if you drop us a line over the next week.
Some parents, sorry, Mrs. Hamer, some parents were asking about the Year 5 cohort. We've obviously got the historical data from Year 4 that's followed them up, and any children that were new actually took a CAT4 assessment as part of the admissions process. So we do have all that information readily available, and it's been handed to the Year 5 class teachers. Yeah, we'll just move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
So for me, this is one of the best ways to explain the CAT4 assessment. Both of these children in this cartoon are performing the same task. They are both going to come out with a model aeroplane at the end of the session. However, you can see the little girl on the left-hand side of the screen. She's reading the instructions and she's very verbal in her learning. She likes to know step by step. She likes to know the stages, and she's approaching it from a very different angle to the boy, who's obviously learning. He's figuring it out through modeling. He's probably a lot more spatial, whereas she's very verbal. So again, just to really stress that the test tells us this kind of information. What kind of learner are they, rather than ability or attainment or prior knowledge.
This is over to me now, isn't it, Mrs. Hamer? Perfect. So if you actually have your report handy, it would be really good actually as we go through this presentation to just refer to the report. We can guide you and kind of talk you through each part and each section. So after the first few pages, I've got my report in front of me here to help me. It obviously says what CAT4 is, why we use CAT4, And for anyone who missed the first session, it's also got some examples of the types of questions and a little glossary there about verbal classification, etc., number series. And then when you turn the page, you'll see on page 5, you will see your child's name, year group, etc., and it will have the different batteries of verbal, quantitative, non-verbal, and spatial. And you'll see in the middle there, there's that yellow section. And all that highlights there is that most children who take the CAT4 test in whatever year group, this is where they normally lie in regards to their verbal or quantitative, non-verbal or spatial skills. So you'll be able to see your child's profile just there. And again, it's really important to stress to everybody. I had one child in my class.
I can't do it.
Can we just make sure that we've got our microphones off, everyone? Thank you. I had one child in my class on Sunday come running in. The report had been sent home on Thursday and said, Mr. Budd, please, can you set me more work? I've had my CAT4 scores. I'm not very happy with them. And I had to explain to my class, I was like, listen, it's not about where you're at academically. This just tells me how you may learn best. And it's really useful for myself and the other teachers across the whole of the school to have this information. So if you do find that there is one of these batteries that is slightly below that yellow, don't panic, don't worry, don't stress. It's already been brought to the teacher's attention. And we'll talk to you a little bit later about this, about some of the strategies that we can use in the classroom and also what you can do at home. So if we were to look at this child here, for example, we can see that in every single one of those batteries, they're above average. And this student would probably be quite a high ability student. Sorry, not a high ability student, but would have high cognitive ability skills that they could apply into the curriculum. Okay. So you can take time to look at your own child's. Here you might find that your child's profile looks a little bit like this. And you can see here that this child, for example, has scored average in every battery. And there isn't one area that particularly stands out, quite even across the board. And this student, we would say, is equally balanced across 4 areas of the reasoning skills.
And I think, sorry to jump in, sir, I think part of this, you know, when you look at this child isn't necessarily going to have a learning preference. So if you imagine that little cartoon, the little boy much preferred to model. He was very much a spatial learner. The little girl was reading all the instructions. She likes the step-by-steps. She's probably very much a verbal learner. This child example here on the screen as we speak, they don't have a particular strength or a dominance in any one area. So they will actually probably do okay regardless of how the instruction is delivered, and they won't naturally lean to one or the other. Whereas if we go back a slide, sir, sorry, this child here is obviously much stronger in verbal, and they would probably like to debate, they would probably like discussions, they probably would talk your ear off the whole way home. They're going to be the child that very much likes to, that lives through words, for example.
Perfect. And then if we look here at the example 3, again, don't look at this and think, oh my word, my child's below the yellow area just there. It's just saying that this individual here is slightly below in their verbal reasoning skills and quantitative. So as teachers, we would just be very aware of this, that maybe if we were talking a lot and we were given a lot of verbal instructions, it wouldn't be the best strategy to use for this child. It might be that when we're learning something new in English or science or a new concept or, you know, further understanding, that we would do it very visually and also with concrete materials, because we can see there that that spatial bar is just slightly above the rest. So we would use some visual strategies to help and support this student here. Yeah.
I think it's important to note as well that the batteries can change over time. It's the reason that we test on average every 2 years. The chances are, as it said on the screen, that this is a student that has English as a second language. And it's possible that as they were doing this assessment, some of the words that they struggled with are the reason for their score. If in 2 years' time or 12 months' time, they've been through the English college and we supported them in our classrooms and their English language skill has developed quite significantly, you would probably find that the verbal and quantitative batteries will jump quite significantly. So at no point is this a fixed report on your child. This is a snapshot of where they are now. And again, as Sir said, this is the real point of this for us, is to get to know your children. So we would look at this and we would say, right, lots of words and a big page of writing is not going to work well for the student. Let's add in pictures, let's add in diagrams, and they're much more likely to understand it. So the outcome is the same. They're still going to finish their Year 5 lessons, they're still going to feel their GCSE lessons, but they're just going to maybe approach them in a different way because teachers are going to adapt their needs for that. I've noticed that people have started to put questions in the chat box. So hopefully we'll be able to answer all those questions as we move through, but please keep putting them there and we will address them towards the end.
Perfect. Okay. So here, if you can just about see that, if we were to take this example student, we've got a student called Jessica, and you can see by looking at the 4 different areas there, that she has scored above average in every single battery, and again that she would have high reasoning ability skills that she could apply into subjects. And again, we would make sure when we're looking at this, we would look at where that bias lies and what teaching strategies we could incorporate into the classroom to cater her learning needs. So if we dive into the summary, which you guys will also have on page, I'll just find it now, also on page 5, this will give you just a little summary from the CAT4, any preference or any equal bias, any skills that particularly stand out. And also it will give you some strategies and guidance that you can use at home to support your child. And we also get one of these in school for teachers. So teachers will get a summary for each individual child if they want to go in and delve a little bit further into somebody's profile. So we get one at school, it correlates very much the same, and you guys will get one at home too. Anything to add on to that one, Mrs. Hamer?
No, I just think this is where it gets quite exciting, and this is where it gets really useful for you as a parent. So especially the bottom bullet point here about Jessica, think about the activities outside of school that can build on her abilities. So we know that Jessica, from the bar chart from the previous slide, she's a very strong verbal learner. So maybe we want to put Jessica through the debating club or the drama society. You know, she might really enjoy even looking at subjects like law in the future. Those subjects are really going to work well for her because that's what she finds most natural. So I think this is the really lovely bit out of the CAT4 report that gets to delve into your child a little bit further.
Absolutely. And that's a really important point there, isn't it? Like those extracurricular activities that we offer at the English College can help just as much with the academic and the cognitive ability of children. So I think you're right there. That is a lovely bullet point at the end. Okay, moving on. Do you want to talk about this part first, Mrs. Hamer?
Year 10, Year 11, Year 12 and Year 13, sorry. Can you hear me, Mr. Budd?
Yes, I think you just got a little bit frozen for a second.
You tell me my connection's unstable. So some year groups will have a diagram like this inside their CAT4 report. Now, not all year groups. These are indicators of how your child may do in different subjects. Now, the word to stress there is may. This is not a prediction, it's an indicator. So the idea is when your child sits the CAT4 assessment and these grades are developed, is that the CAT4 company compare all of the other students that have ever taken the exam or the test, and then they compare all of the students that have got exactly the same profile as your child. And they say, okay, so the average child who has got the exact same profile as your child has the probability of getting an 8, for example, in GCSE, DT and textiles, has as most likely to get an 8 in English at GCSE. However, some of the students with the exact same profile as your child, the top 25% of those students will get a 9. So this isn't really about your child, it's about comparing the profile that your child has received or scored or attained, for lack of a better word, how they have done compared to everybody else in the test that also got the same score, and how those students did when they actually sat their GCSEs. So that's why it's an indicator. So it's comparing your child's profile to other students that have got the same profile, and it basically tells you how those students did in general. Your child might do much better, your child might not reach those scores, but it's an indicator. Now, the reason that we don't put this on year 7 and year 8, for example, is because obviously they're going to be retested in year 9. And at year 7, it's a little bit early to start thinking about the indicators at GCSE, especially when we know that the batteries can really change. We've already spoken about the verbal battery for our EAL learners. They could spend 1 year or 2 years at the English college and can see a significant jump in their verbal score because now they understand the vocabulary, they understand the questions. So it would be unfair in year 7 or year 8 to give them a GCSE target grade. The same goes for A-level. The same principle is applied, should I say, and also there for Key Stage 2. Is there anything that you want to add, sir?
I think I just had some questions from parents about, obviously, the numbers are slightly different at the end of Key Stage 2. So this is actually based on if the children were to sit a Department for Education SATs paper, which is a test that children take in England at the end of year 6 to kind of summarise their Key Stage 2 education. And just for those parents who want to know, 100 is the average score. And again, as Ms. Hamer has said, it's just an indicator. It's not to say this is what this child will definitely 100% manage to achieve by the end of year 6. It's just an indication that when children sat this test, the majority went on to achieve these scores, again, with the same profiles. So it works exactly the same for Key Stage 2, which is the end of year 6.
So I'm just going to pick up a question here. Somebody has just said, does this mean the comparison on the year that they do the assessment might show different results to the assessment done 2 years ago? I hope I understand your question, but yeah, as your child progresses through school, it very much might be that their assessment changes and their results in each battery changes. We see verbal develop quite significantly in this area of the world when students have been in school for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think somebody else has said, what does it mean by level D in the report? So for example, for year 7, I'm just double checking, yeah, year 7 take what they call the CAT4 D test. Year 9 take the CAT4 F test. It's just the way they've named them.
So here now, if you actually have a little look at your child's profile, and again, this presentation will be made available on iSAMS alongside the recording as last time. You can have a little look at your child's profile, and obviously you've got the summary there underneath, but we just thought it'd be quite beneficial to share just some more information about each of the different batteries. So here for verbal, you can see those children with a high verbal score, some of their characteristics and strategies that we use. And here are just a list of strategies for the low verbal score of what we do to support those children in lessons. And again, it's something that you can incorporate at home. If a child's coming home to do some extra work, or they've got a piece of homework or an extended task to complete, and you want to sit side by side and help them with it, you can take some of these strategies and think, well, if my child's got a slightly low verbal battery, I'm not going to sit there and give them lots of verbal information. I'll know to maybe give them something a little bit more pictorial. And again, you can just look through the strategies here I won't read them all out because it'll take a long time, but just feel free to look at the screen and refer to your child's profile and just look at some of those strategies that you can use.
Yeah, and this recording will be on ISAM, so feel free to take your time with this. We'll kind of move through them now, but you can come back to this later when you have time to really sit and digest your child's report. But actually, this one here, the next few slides we're going to do, this the green boxes, as it were, the tools that it gives you will really help your child develop in all of their subjects, because you're adapting the work to what suits their needs. And somebody has asked a question on the messages along the same lines. They've said, will the teaching style be customized according to the child's strength? Yes, all of your teachers will know where your child lies within each battery, and they will know if they've got a particular dominance in one area. And teachers, when appropriate and to the best of their ability, will adapt resources as much as possible. And the example cartoon is very much what we do as practitioners. I would know that the little girl is very much a word-driven verbal learner. The instruction and the piece of work or the task I give her would be very different to the little boy, because he's very spatial. So by your teachers knowing this, where possible, they will absolutely adapt the learning and the delivery for your child.
And just to bounce on that, actually, today when I was in my math lesson, I'm quite aware now of where children are falling in regards to their cognitive strengths and abilities. And it was the same objective for everybody. We were recapping a 2-digit number times a 2-digit number, and those children who were showing slightly developing areas in verbal, they had concrete materials to carry out the activity, and those children with the strong verbal battery and the quantitative, they just wanted to use the numbers and the method. So it was the same learning happening, but we were just coming in at it at different angles, and that's what it's about. It's just scaffolding the children to get to the same place and the same standard, but just in different ways. And I'll say, you know, all of the teachers are very skilled at this school, and they do it very successfully. But yeah, I'll move on so you can have a...
Yeah, thank you. So this again, very much following the same pattern. If you look at your own child's report, have a look at their verbal bar on the bar chart, and depending on where they fit, you might find that there's things that they really enjoy, and then you might find ways to support them again in that green box. Now, if I just go to some of the questions, somebody said, what does a spatial score that is lower than before indicate? It just means that your child's changed over time, they've developed. It might be that your child, when they first did it, had a very low verbal score, again, because they were EAL. They're now less low on the verbal score, and actually that's more naturally their ability, but it was being masked before because obviously they were doing the test in English rather than their first language, perhaps. It might be that as they've got older, they've just matured and work in different ways now. I know if I reflect on me as a learner, the kind of learner I was at 16 is not the same learner I am now. I know very much that I work in a different way now as I've got older, and that's the same for children as well. So it just means they've changed over time. It doesn't mean anything negative, but this is why we retest every 2 years or so, because then we have up-to-date and relevant information. Again, somebody's mentioned the level C and the level D on the tests, and it is just the name of the test. The test runs from CAT4 level X, which actually goes to foundation stage and the really young ones, all the way to CAT4 level G, and that's the ones the sixth formers take. It's just a way for the administrators of the test to know which test to give. They could have numbered them, they could have named them.
Yeah. Just from a primary,
while we're talking, sorry.
Yeah, just from a primary perspective, if any parents would like to know that Year 4 did CAT4A and Year 6 did CAT4C. And again, just in order. What did you say? Sorry, Mrs. Hamer.
The next slide on, sir, and then we'll have a look. We'll leave this on the background whilst we talk. So again, if you look at your child's spatial bar in the bar chart, you can determine whether it's high or low. And this, again, same format, gives you strategies and ideas. Now, just while we're talking about this, somebody said that their child is attending online learning at the moment. When they come back to school, that if they're in the primary school, Mr. Budd will pick them up and we will do the CAT4 test with them then. And if they're in the secondary school, I will pick them up at some point and do the CAT4 test with them then. The test takes about 2 hours, so please bear with us. We want to try and minimize impacts on learning. So we will welcome them back into the school, we'll get them settled, we'll give them a few days, and then we'll take them at a time where it's going to have the minimum impacts on their learning and the curriculum. And somebody else has mentioned, do the test results affect the results they have at the end of the year? Does it affect or limit their end of year results? No. It's just information for your teachers. It's just information for you as parents, how to get the best out of your child. In actual fact, in a lot of cases at GCSE and A level, it doesn't affect which option they're in. It doesn't affect which set they're in. It's simply an information tool for the teachers and also for you, so that we know how to get the most and the best out of your child.
And that links on quite nicely to this slide about what do we do as a school. So it's just as parents to reassure you that the information has been shared with all teachers and all levels of leadership, heads of facts, heads of school, etc., etc. And what teachers will be doing from now. And I think we've actually got a training day coming up very soon where teachers will be really sifting through these with a fine-tooth comb, and we'll be developing further training to the teachers about some of the strategies that we can use in lessons that are going to have great impact. And just really importantly there, we just want to reiterate again, it's not attainment, it's all about ability and potential. And what we always do in the first instance is quality teaching is always the first stage of intervention. So we adapt and we change our teaching strategies to meet the needs of the children in our classes.
Yeah, there's been a couple more questions just about how are the indicators formed. So I'm just going to kind of run through that one more time. The CAT4 assessment gives your child the bar chart. It then looks at all of the other pupils historically that have ever taken the test that have got the same bar chart as your child. And then they will have collected data on all those children that have gone historically, and they will be able to say that on average, for most of the children that have got a similar profile to your child, they got an 8 at GCSE, or they got a 7 at GCSE, or they got whatever at Key Stage 2. Some children, the top 25%, actually got a 9 at GCSE, or they got a star at A level, whatever it might be. So all it is an indicator of what children with similar profiles compared to your child have done in the past and how your child might do. The reason it's there is to help you at GCSE and A level for things like subject selection. You know, if a child is particularly strong in the verbal areas, we would probably recommend history, law, politics, geography maybe, psychology. If your child was very spatially strong, we might be suggesting DT, we might be suggesting STEAM subjects, we might be suggesting sciences. So it's just about the strength of your child so we can give them the best advice possible. It's simply a tool that allows us to know them even better than we already do.
It's a very, as you say, Miss Hamer, it's a huge database that they've collected over many, many years to just look at those trends and patterns of where children start and where they kind of end up. Very scientific and very mathematical indeed. Sorry,
so
I'll just...
It's the very first slide for me. Is it possible that you can scroll right the way back?
Yeah, sure.
Where you went to stop? There. So somebody's just asked, what does it mean by non-verbal? So these are the 4 batteries, just to kind of reiterate. We measure how able your child is to think using words, to think using numbers, to think using shape, and to think using shape and space. And again, as Mr. Budd's already mentioned, if you have a look at the report that was sent home, there are some sample questions. So you get the idea of why this isn't an ability test, why this isn't an attainment test, and there's no prior knowledge and no prior learning needed, because it gives them a shape, for example, for non-verbal, and they have to be able to, in their mind, rotate that shape and link it to a new shape. Now, some students find that really easy. It's not a strength I have at all. I'm very much about the verbal reasoning. My dominance is very much with words. So for students that have got a weak verbal reasoning, it just means that they're not as good maybe with diagrams and shapes. You know, I think about a game of Tetris. If any of you have ever played the old-fashioned Tetris, I'm rubbish because my brain doesn't work that way. I would much rather do a word search or a crossword, read a book. Those things make me happier, where a game of Tetris doesn't. But I bet if you ask the DT department, or if you ask the science department, they would much prefer to think with shapes and models than I would.
Do you want me to head back to?
Yeah, lovely, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
So somebody said, do we share this with the children themselves? We certainly share it a little bit more in secondary school. Yeah. They will have an awareness of themselves in secondary school, but also we will probably have those conversations, especially if they are what we would consider quite extreme. So if you think about Jessica, when she was so much stronger in her verbal score, we might say to children, you know, are you reading enough? Do you think you get more pleasure from reading? I'm going to give you this kind of work because it suits you better. So we would kind of have those open conversations, and especially when you get higher up the school at GCSE and A level, because we're preparing students for university. So they need to know their natural strengths before they move to another school, or before they move to university, or before they start the world of work. Mr. Budd, how does that work in primary?
Yeah, we have to be a little bit more sensitive with the younger ones, if you can believe that Mr. Budd is sensitive. That when you know, children ask, we just talk about it. We just change our teaching, we change our style, and again, we have to be really careful with how we're wording this to our pupils in the primary school. The example is, you know, the guy that walked in on Sunday to me and said, "Mr. Budd, I've not done well in my CAT4." And I was like, no, that's not what it's about. And this individual just had an even profile, and he hasn't got one particular strength of how he learns best. And it was quite sad, really, because in class he's doing absolutely amazing. So, you know, the profile showing he's kind of, you know, here, and in class he's here. So it's like, wow, he's doing such a good job. And I thought it really just got the wrong end of the stick there. So yeah, if they ask, we will be very honest, and we tell them about the test before they took it. If parents want to share that information, that's absolutely fine. And like the secondary school, we're always very honest with our pupils, but we have to be very sensitive because it is quite a tough concept, especially for the year 4 and younger children, to understand a cognitive ability test, and how are my teachers now going to use this information. So yeah.
And also, just to chip in again, as we've already said, we retest every 2 years because we know that children develop. They develop at a much faster rate than we do as adults, and we still go through periods of change. So we can't expect their profile to be the same for the rest of their life. So whilst we share the information with them and we talk to them about it, also we understand that this is not fixed in stone. And again, I keep going back to it, but the verbal element where we have an English as an additional language learner, they're the ones that we see the big changes in, especially. But even with the other students, we'll see that over time they might become more verbal as they grow up a little bit and mature a little bit. It just depends on how their brains develop.
Here we've just got some frequently asked questions. We've kind of covered this really about the verbal scores, and it might seem it's just slightly lower in comparison to the other score. And it's just important to remember, you know, children's first languages, what language they learn best in, and that's it. And as Ms. Hamer said, that it changes over time, and it's a real privilege to see that happening at the school, especially having them in year 4 and then thinking about some of these children going further into the high school. And that's quite an exciting process of how that's going to change. And then a lot of parents always ask, you know, how can I support my son and daughter at home with their learning? All the strategies you always do, read the profile, go back through this presentation and just continue to do what you've always been doing with your children at home. I'm sure it's been very successful.
Sorry, so somebody's just asked a question about the fact that we are determining what they might achieve in their GCSEs based on this data. To some extent, this is a conversation starter. This does not determine what GCSEs your child will do or how well they will do, but it is a conversation starter. So we can say, based on a CAT4 test, it looks like you might enjoy history, geography, law more, for example, rather than chemistry or computer science. Do you agree? Is that what you want? So when we go through the option process, it's just information. Obviously, the child's decision would still come into play. And you know, as we've said, this isn't a predictor. I'm not telling you what your child will get at the GCSEs. It's just an indicator of what other similar children have done. And we all know, even if you have 2 children at home, no 2 children are the same. Even if you have twins, no 2 children are the same. So this is giving us a guideline or an idea how other children who are similar have done, but we don't use that to inhibit anybody. We use that as a starting point or an indicator, but nothing more.
And also, I think it's just a really useful tool to just maybe identify some children who maybe could go potentially under the radar. You know, if there's like a very quiet child who doesn't speak up much in class, and then you look at their profile and they've got really strong bands, you're thinking, is there a little bit more going on there? Do I need to have a few more conversations and find out a little bit more? But yeah, so hopefully by the end of this second session, and relating it back to the first session that we carried out, you have read your individual report for your child. You now know that the school has shared all this information with everyone's teachers. You've got a bit of a confident understanding of what CAT4 is and what the different batteries are. You can understand the difference between a test of ability and a test of attainment. And I'm sure later on in the year we'll talk to you a little bit more about some of those tests that we'll be doing in the primary school in regards to attainment, not ability. That you now know your child's scores for their most recent CAT4 assessment, and that you can describe some of the teaching strategies that we use at the English College to support your child's learning in the classroom. And hopefully you've managed to take away some strategies that you can use at home to support your child. Do you want to take this one, Miss Hamer?
Yeah, I think it's just the question about which CAT4 assessment it is, and we've already said kind of year 7 sit CAT4D, year 12 sit CAT4G. It's just the names of the test. Year 6 do C, is that right, sir? Yeah,
CAT-C, and year 4 do CAT4A.
It's just the name of the test. It's just for the administrator.
Yeah, on this slide here, it's just also to point out, regardless of CAT4 or anything else, if you do have any questions or queries, you can also arrange a meeting with our Head of Inclusion, Mrs. Ahmed. We've put her email address just at the end there, so feel free to get in touch. And then lastly, just any further questions from anybody?
We've just had a question about sets again, sir. So will children be will be divided into sets based on this data? And again, it goes back to, this is a conversation opener. So your child's teacher will know them incredibly well. They will know where they should be. This is just an extra piece of information. So no is the answer. It might contribute to bigger and wider discussions, but it's just a piece of information that we as teachers use as a tool. And do results decide targets? So at GCSE and A level, yes, it will be on your report. Your CAT4 target will be on your report. And your child will know their CAT4 target, but again, it's simply an indicator. If they exceeded their target, if they were doing really, really well, we would move their target. So it's not inhibiting it any way. It's just at this point in the year, when we've had your child for 5 weeks or whatever it might be, we've got an extra piece of information for them. And again, if your child's doing better than their CAT4 predicted score, perfect. So I'm hoping that we've answered most of the questions, and hopefully you've got a better understanding than maybe you came here with this evening in terms of the CAT4 reports. If you need anything else, myself and Mr. Budd are on email. So if you go back up to our first picture, sir. Just wondering if our first names are on there. Yes, they are. There you go. So if you want to email Mr. Budd, it's mbud@englishcollege.ac.ae. And if you want to email me for the secondary school, it's nhamer@englishcollege.ac.ae. And we'll try our very best to answer your questions as well as we can. If you wanted to make sure that you had your child's report, you can also drop us an email as well if for any reason you haven't received it. Students that did theirs last year, year 5, year 11 and year 13, we can access their reports as well if you don't have them from last year. So I hope that was useful. Myself and Mr. Budd will stay on the call for a little while. I'll keep an eye on the question box, but feel free to leave the call and have an absolutely lovely evening. I'm off to do the Maidan fun run tonight. I'm not sure how fun it is in this temperature, so we'll see. But thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have an absolutely lovely evening.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, whoever said good luck. I'm going to need it. So yeah, you're welcome to log off if you have no further questions.
I feel like the news, this part, you know, when the news finishes and they just kind of like sit like.
Oh, we've just had a lovely message though, so have you read it?
What does it say?
A very informative session.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I'm really pleased.
Have fun at your run. Oh, that's so nice. At the end of year 7, there are symbols like 6. What does this mean? What a question there.
Just bear with me while I pull up a year 7 report. It's possible that those are key stage 3 indicators.
Yeah. Do you know what my advice would be with that is just be really, really careful, because obviously here in the UAE we don't use national curriculum levels such as the 6A, 7C, 7B, 7A and further down the school. We actually use different assessment systems like Classroom Monitor, especially in primary in year 6. We actually just report as beginning, developing, inline and extending. So I'd imagine this to be very much linked to English schools in the UK and Scottish schools.
Yeah,
so don't worry too much about that. Yeah, and again, any individual questions, speak to form tutors, and the best people to speak to will be classroom teachers. And what's this here just at the end? A good score in math. Yeah, again, if the score is, you know, if you feel like the profile is slightly lower than where they're working at, that's great, because it's almost like value added progress to say, look, they're working a little bit above in those areas. So don't worry. Again, it's just an indication.
Yeah, as we said, it's just a conversation starter. So what it shows, it isn't a max at all. It doesn't suggest that that's the maximum your child will achieve. It's just Some other students with a similar profile have got a 6 in the past. So your child might get a 6. That's kind of how they work it out. I've oversimplified it slightly, but it's a conversation starter. We certainly don't use it to limit what a child will get at their GCSEs. We're constantly pushing them to the best of their ability.